Building a family can be a complicated, messy, lonely, and sometimes heartbreaking process. But you don't have to navigate this challenging journey alone. Welcome to the All Paths podcast, where we support and celebrate all of the different ways there are to try to grow your family. We're your hosts, Emily and Lauren from the nonprofit organization All Paths Family Building. And today we're talking with Reema about her journey and work in this space. Reema, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So before we get into your story in detail, we'd love for you just to quickly introduce yourself to our listeners.
Sure. So I'm Reema. I am a single mother by choice. I live in Toronto. I have a daughter who is now 3.5 years old, and I am the founder of Choice Mom Coaching. So I started my journey back when I was 35 years old. I thought I could buy more time, find that partner, so I went through the rounds of egg freezing. I did it twice and I was only left with 2 eggs, which is not really an insurance policy. And so I thought, if I really want to be a mom, I need to start now. And my doctor's like, well, that's my job, to get you pregnant. And I said, give me a couple months to kind of get my head around it, think about the donor piece and just everything that comes with it. But to me, what was more important was being a mom than finding a partner, because I could always find a partner later. But, my biological clock was just ticking. And every year, every birthday, I was just dreading it because I hadn't, come close to finding that partner or being pregnant or being a mom. And so I thought that would be the hardest part of my, journey, making the actual decision. And then I was faced with unexplained infertility. And I went through 6 rounds of IUI medicated, and then we moved to IVF. I was like, this is going to be it now. IVF's going to work. Did 1 round of IVF. We got 4 eggs out. We unfroze the 2. We had 6. We ended up with 3 embryos, but none of them passed the pre-genetic testing. And at that point, I hit my lowest of the low of the process, thinking, is this really ever going to happen for me? And something inside me just was like, just keep going. Maybe you're struggling because you're meant to help other people. And so I was like, if I make it, if I actually do get pregnant, I'm going to support women on this journey, because I just felt really alone on mine. And so we tried again. We got 8 eggs. It was my best yield. And then 3 embryos again. 1 failed the pre-genetic testing. 1 was inconclusive and 1 passed. And that turned out to be my daughter.
Wow. What a journey. Yeah. Can you back up a little bit and just
Sure.
tell us more about, how you got started and what were those kind of initial conversations with others or yourself, or, how did you land on, I'm going to do this?
Yeah. So I'm going to go way back in the sense of my parents were arranged marriage. In the Indian culture, it's very common for families to get arranged marriage. And it wasn't always a happy marriage. And I always told myself I will never be in a relationship just for the kids, which I felt like my parents were. And I said I would never settle. I would never just do an arranged marriage just to get married, because that's not the kind of life I want to live. And so it was always in the back of my mind that if I don't find a partner or the right partner for me, I will consider, becoming a single mother. But thinking about it and actually making that decision is 2 very different things.
Totally.
When I came to 35, that's when it really started to hit in terms of that biological clock. All my friends were getting married or having second babies. And I just felt depressed at that point at my birthdays, because I was like, this isn't the life I wanted. I wanted to be a mom. And so freezing my eggs was really the hope that I was like, if I had gotten, a good yield of eggs, I probably would have waited longer for a partner and hoped that someone would have came along, because that was my thing. Every year, every birthday, I was like, this is the year I'm going to meet someone and hopefully move forward. But it's also the worst thing when you're dating to be like, do you want a family? Do you want kids? And, because it's kind of, you want to kind of get moving on that ASAP. So that's not always a great way to show up in dating. Whereas now, as a single mother by choice, I don't care about that stuff, right? Like I can choose to be in a relationship or not. We're not tied together because of, a child. We can have our time together or not. And that's a lovely thing, to have that freedom.
Right.
Yeah.
So after you went through the egg freezing process, was that when you were like, Okay, I've got my insurance kind of. I didn't get as many as I would have hoped. I'm going to explore the next steps, or was there something else pushing you in that direction?
Yeah, I did 2 rounds. So the first round they had to cancel it because there was only 2 follicles that had grown. And I was like, there's no way I'm retrieving for 2 eggs and spending around, that amount of money. And so we tried again. I switched clinics also at that point because I didn't feel I was getting the care I thought I would be getting at the clinic that I was at. And so I switched. We got 6 follicles that had grown. So I was like, that's an amazing, jump from the last one. But only 2 actually came out. And when only 2 actually came out of the follicles, which I didn't even know was possible, I thought
Yes.
every follicle has 1 egg and each one will release 1 egg. And when only 2 come out, I thought, okay, something's really wrong here. And the doctor said, we can try again. And I said, we've tried twice now, and this is the result. I don't think I have any time left. And so that was really the impetus for me to just start and really consider this, because to me it was like now or never in some ways, because my window was starting. It felt like it was closing. And so that's how I made that call.
And when you first started the egg freezing process, did they put you through kind of like the standard fertility testing ahead of time? Like, did you have any indication that this was going to be challenging before you started?
Not at all. So, we did do the fertility assessment. That was the first step before going into egg
Mm,
freezing. And they said the numbers look great. We could
right.
expect maybe around 10, 10 eggs through the retrieval. I was like, great, that sounds great. So then when the first one comes around and you're only at 2 follicles, I'm like, this is not good.
Hold on. Yeah.
Something went wrong or something isn't going right. And so switching the clinics and getting 6, I was like, okay, this looks a little bit better. That could have been
Right.
something to freeze. But as we all know, 2 eggs don't mean anything at the end of the day. It's
Mhm.
embryos you want.
Right.
And so I knew that wasn't going to be enough to wait any longer.
And that's, the first devastating piece of news is you have no indication this is going to be more challenging than it's an already challenging process. And so then to get those results when you had the impression everything was going to be fine or, have a higher yield, it's like, wait a second, what do we miss here? And why is this already so painful?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I always thought I lived a healthy lifestyle. I exercised, I
Mhm.
ate well, and you think you do all the things right, and that means your fertility is going to be okay. And it's no, like that's not how
Yes.
things work when it comes to fertility, right?
Right.
Yeah, it is so frustrating because in so many other spaces in your life, it's, you work hard towards your goal and you eventually get to the goal.
You get the results. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
family building is just like, pat, getting, you can
Right.
work as hard as you want, and it doesn't, in some cases, it's not going to change the outcome.
Yeah. All the tools and lessons and things that work for you in the past to achieve goals just don't apply here. And that can be the hardest thing to digest is what do you mean? Before, if I put the time and the effort and the energy and I worked hard and I followed protocols and I played by the rules, I would have success. So
Mhm.
what do you mean this isn't working?
Yeah.
Exactly. That's the lesson I had to learn after IVF. Number one is I'm that type A person. You tell me to do something, I will do it to a T, exactly like I was trying to do everything in terms of the supplements, traditional Chinese
Mhm.
medicine, acupuncture, anything that could be done, castor oil packs, anything that could be done, I was doing it. And after that first IVF round failed, I told myself, okay, this is the universe's way of telling you you are no longer in control. Because if you
Mhm.
could control this, it would be done. And now you
Right.
need to you need to surrender to this process. You need to control what you can control and let the rest go. And so at that point, that's when I really realized the difference between letting go and surrendering versus, how people say, oh, just don't
Mhm.
try so hard and it'll happen. I hated that line. To me,
Mhm.
it's more
Mhm.
do what you can do to keep your results up. The outcome is not going to be in your hands. You got to let go of the outcome. And so that's when the line came to my mind of I'm going to keep going until the doctors tell me I can't. And then I'm going to find a doctor that says I can keep going, because I was
Yes.
ready to keep going at that point. And I was like, I'll just keep going. If it doesn't work, I can't control it. We'll try again. And I was just letting go of the outcome at that point, which made that last round a lot less stressful. It's probably why I got a better yield in terms of the 8 eggs, which I had never gotten throughout the process. when the meds were trying to, making me feel all groggy and, angry, cranky, all the emotions, I was like, that's just the drugs working. It's great. You're feeling what you should be feeling rather than, I'm just, in it and feeling terrible. Right. So it was a completely shift in my mindset after that round of IVF. And I feel like that contributed to that, outcome.
Yeah. Wow.
That's hard to do. I'm
Yes.
impressed that you were able to switch off. I mean, I think
It's easy
for a
to
lot of people,
spiral.
this
Yeah.
is, yeah, this is the first time that you're faced with the reality that like you are not in control. And I think for a lot of people, rather than be like, okay, I'm going to accept that, they're like, no, I want to cling even harder to the little tiny pieces that I might maybe be able to control. So,
Hmm.
how did you get to that mindset? Like,
Right.
Yeah, the mindset came from probably, I have been a coach or, an executive coach and a career coach for the past, 10 years. Um, as I was becoming a coach, a big part of the work that I did was on myself in terms of personal development. I read 52 books in a year. I read all books around personal development, optimizing my sleep, meditation, all the things that could help me sort of persevere now finally came in handy at this point. So it was, self-coaching myself through the process. It was the meditation. It was, the walks and the journaling and all of that put together was finally coming in to help me go through this process. So I'm super thankful that I had done the work beforehand, not knowing that I would need it in this way, but it did help.
That's incredible.
yeah, it's wonderful that you had those tools kind of already there that you could
Yeah.
pick up and be like, oh, I didn't expect to use them in this way, but I've got some strategies to help.
Exactly.
So, when you were moving to IUI and IVF, can you talk a little bit about what the donor process was? How did
Yeah,
you navigate that piece of the journey?
sure. Yeah. So with the donor process, you can choose from several sperm banks. You can decide whether you want a known donor or closed donor, open donor, all these things. So, the first question I always say you have to ask yourself, do you want someone you know, or do you want an, anonymous sperm donor? And for me, I did consider some guy friends that I had and, got the courage to even ask one to say, would you consider, donating your sperm. And he's like, it would be really hard not to be a part of that child's life, like knowing that I had a child out there and not be a part of the life. And they said, respectfully, no. And I understand that, response. And so I decided to move into, and also with the known donor, there's just, obviously you need to get a fertility lawyer involved. You got to get the agreements, in place. I always say, consult a lawyer, know your rights, make sure you've protected the rights of yourself, your child, when going through this process. So it is that extra work that needs to be done if you go that route. I decided then to go to the sperm banks. And then it was the question, do I want an open donor or closed donor in terms of do I want my child to reach out to the donor when they are 18? And at first I was like, it's going to be anonymous. I don't want my child reaching out. And a lot of that was just coming from a place of fear of just like, what if they don't like them? What if the person says something? Or, I was just worried of they would be disappointed. And, in making that decision, I felt like I was taking that decision away from my child. And so I got over my fear of it and realized it's more important to have for me, it's everyone's personal preference to choose an open donor. And so my child can reach out to this donor when she's 18. And then once you've made that choice, then it's your criteria of what you want in a donor. And so it can be superficial in the sense of, I thought I was going to have a boy. And so I want a tall donor, what eye color, skin, all of those things you can choose. Do I want an Indian donor versus, a non-Indian donor? And I will say for anyone who is of South Asian background or Asian background, there are very few donors donating, so it is very hard to find a donor that is Indian or South Asian or even Black. There are very few, and so that was another decision. Which way do I go that way? And then it's going through the profiles and filtering through what sort of resonates with you. And I can honestly say it was like a project for me. I was on 4 or 5 sperm banks. I was going through profiles every day, just peeking through, seeing what resonated, what stuck with me. And then finally, I brought it down to 3 profiles and really just read through the essay is really what stuck with me, because each donor might write a little bit of a note to the child or just a little bit about themselves. And I just found the donor that I had selected, one, his sister had experienced fertility issues. So he wanted to do this for someone. And then 2, the way he wrote his essay talking about his upbringing and his values, it was very much aligned to the way I was brought up and my values. And so when thinking about explaining the donor to my daughter, not only would I show the pictures and sort of the information we get, but then it would also be like I chose him because he had the same sort of values that I have and that you are instilled with. And that's why I chose him.
Wow, that's really special.
I know you said the first couple of rounds were not successful. Were you able to stick with the same donor throughout the whole process? Did you end up swapping donors?
I did. Yeah, good question. I did swap. So after I did 6 rounds of medicated IUIs with the same one, and then I did that first IVF round with that same one previous to the one that worked. And then finally, I thought, okay, that next round of IVF, I told myself this time I'm not going to try and control everything. So if for whatever reason my cycle is canceled to start this next month, I will look for a new donor. And so I went in for the blood test. The cycle got canceled. And I said, the universe has spoken. I'm going to switch donors. And so that's how I kind of made the decision, because I was tired of trying to control everything that I could control and trying to just let go. And that was my way of sort of letting go and saying, okay, if my cycle's canceled, I have more time to look for a donor and I'm going to take that time to do it. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, I did switch, and that was the round that turned out to work.
Was it easier or harder the second time around?
Definitely easier, because at that point I sort of had a process down. I knew sort of what really was important to me. My criteria, when I started, the criteria was very long. When I got towards the second time or towards the end, it was very short. It was like, I really just need these things in my donor. The other nice thing about the donor piece, which you wouldn't necessarily know if you had a partner, is that they have the genetic testing done. So they test for about 256 or so genetic diseases. So if you're going to be passing down anything similar to what you have, and avoid that donor. So that was an important piece to the selection process.
So now you have one embryo who's passed embryo genetic testing, and you're faced with, okay, now I'm going to gear up for a transfer. How was that experience?
Yeah. I mean, that was just exciting, right? I'm finally at a point where I can, I have an embryo that I can transfer. And again, I was trying to also just kind of let go and not rush the process, letting the doctors kind of say, okay, we can start this time. I tried to do all the things in terms of testing. So the biopsy of the uterus to see if there was any inflammation, to find out what the optimal time is to implant the embryo. Like, I did every test you could do because I had the one. I didn't want to know what the inconclusive embryo was, if it was going to be passed or not, until I was done the process, because I didn't want to feel like everything was relying on this one embryo. So I said, let's just leave it. You guys can retest it, but don't tell me the results until we're done. And so
smart.
That helped for sure. And so at that point, it was just getting sort of my body ready. I was doing the acupuncture again. I was doing traditional Chinese herbs again. Anything I could to get things ready. But I knew if it doesn't stick, it's okay, because we've now gotten to at least a point where I can make embryos. So I know I can do that. And then even when I finally got the pregnancy test and it was positive, I was like, great. I know my body can get pregnant. No matter what happens from now, it will happen. I can't control it, but at least I know I'm at a point where I can get pregnant. So I just needed those things to help me keep going, no matter what would happen. And I did have a bit of a scare at 6 weeks. I was inserting my progesterone, and when I took it out, there was blood coming out, and I was like, oh, no, let this not be.
Sorry.
It is the scariest moment when you see that blood running down your leg. And called the fertility clinic right away. They said, you can come in at noon. And I was like, noon? How am I supposed to sit with this till noon? And so I called my mom and she's like, okay, I'm coming. And I did actually jump right back onto a call for work. And I'm like half thinking about,
Oh,
what's
wow.
going on, but I'm standing and doing this coaching call with a client.
Oh my
And
goodness.
then my mom came and we were just waiting. And she's like, we won't know until we know. We don't know until we know. Let's just keep faith, keep faith. And so got to the clinic, had my favorite ultrasound technician grabbed her and said, can you check? Because I knew she would tell me the results right away rather than waiting for the doctor to come in. I'm like, can you check? And then she put it on and she's like, I see the heartbeat. And I was like, thank God. But yeah, it's the worst moment, scariest for sure.
Right. And then how was the rest of your pregnancy?
It was amazing in a sense. I was just so grateful at that point. After everything I'd been through, doing it solo, I was just like, I can't believe I'm pregnant and I'm doing this by myself and this is going to happen and I'm going to be a mom and I'm not going to miss out. So there was, in the sense, I always say it's in some ways it's easier because there's no expectations of a partner to, hey, can you put the crib together? Can you do this? Can you do that? Like there's no letdowns or disappointments because you have to do it all. And that's okay because you've kind of figured out how you will pull it all together. And to me, I was just thankful to be in this point in the journey. And that every month and trimester that passed, it was just closer and closer to getting, to the dream.
Again, your mindset just seems so strong and so supportive of every step of your journey. And I'm just amazed.
Very zen, which I feel like is not the case for a lot of us going through fertility treatment and then pregnancy after. It's again, you're trying to control anything humanly possible to try to affect the outcome. But it's amazing that you were able to give yourself over to the process.
Yeah.
But where did you get support during this time, whether it was through fertility treatment or your pregnancy and postpartum period? Who were your biggest cheerleaders?
Yeah, you mentioned your mom, so I was curious, how your parents felt about
my choice.
Your path.
Yeah. So let me speak to that first. So, when I originally had told my parents on a family vacation, before I'd even sort of started the journey, I'd said, you know what, maybe I just won't get married. I'll just have a baby on my own. The sentiment at that point was not supportive. They were just like, why wouldn't you wait? Why wouldn't you give your child a father? We don't know what kind of genetics we're passing down, because they had no clue of what a donor process looks like. And I said to them, I'm like, I will know more about this donor or about this person than you two will have known about each other when you made the choice, because they met once and then said yes. And so other than knowing, their professional backgrounds or, their upbringing, the families, they don't have the level of detail that I would have in terms of when I selected my donor. So that's one thing. And when I went through the part of trying to freeze my eggs, they saw I was trying to preserve it. They saw I was trying to buy more time, and they saw how devastated I was when it didn't work out. And they also know me when I make up my mind, it is made up and they can't really stop what's coming after that. And so, I think after they saw how devastated I was in terms of wanting to preserve my fertility, they came on board. They were just like, just find a good donor. And I said, yeah, don't worry, I will. That is actually something I have not shared with anyone, even them, in terms of pictures, or I didn't involve them actually in the process, not because I didn't care for their opinion or anything. It was just more, I felt like it was very private and I wanted to share that information to my child first before I shared it with the world. If anyone should know their biological father, they should know it should be my child. And that was just my choice. I know now there's parties and, different ways of trying to pick the donor. But that was just my
Mm.
way of choosing it. And once she came, I mean, my parents were over the moon. She is the first grandchild, and so very spoiled.
Oh,
The other
Wow.
great thing about being a single parent by choice is there's an all access pass to the child. Like there's no other in laws to share it with. They get all the holidays if they choose to.
It's true.
And so that is the nice thing that they are the only grandparent sort of for them, and it is a very special bond. So yes, my mom has been a big supporter through the journey. I will say the fertility clinics, yes, they support on the medical aspect, but for the emotional side, there's really not much there. They do offer counselors, but the counselors don't have lived experience, and it's very different talking to someone who has the lived experience versus someone who can share with you examples of lived experience. And so I found that there wasn't that piece, and a big reason why I started Choice Mom Coach. But I did get a doula during my pregnancy because I did want to do a natural birth. I wanted to test my mind, my mental strength to see could I do it without an epidural and go through a natural birth. And
Uh-huh.
so if I was going to do that, I thought, let me have the appropriate support for that. And so it was great having the doula supporting in terms of preparing for labor, going through some exercises and things, being able to text someone to be like, hey, is this normal, or am I feeling something? Like that is a great thing to have when you're solo. So I would highly recommend a doula, and just also being your advocate during the labor in terms of this is what I want, don't want, if I can't speak to it, given whatever I'd be going through. And then even pictures at the end, like she's there with, yeah, able to take pictures of me. My mom was in the delivery with me, and so it was just nice to have that. And the check-ins after, so someone other than family checking in to just see how are you really doing mentally after the baby has arrived. Do you have what you need? Have you prepared, all the things? So she was also a sleep coach, and so that supports with lactation. And so that was really important to just have that kind of support after the fact.
That's great. And how was your postpartum experience? Now your daughter's here. You've done it. Was it a big exhale? Were you struggling at all with anything?
Yeah, so it was a huge exhale when she finally was on my chest. One, because I did it, we did
Mhm.
it in the sense she's here. And two, because I did it without an epidural, which was also like, yay. That recovery
Wow.
was really smooth because there was very little tearing, because I was in control for the most part in terms of the pushing. And I probably had Tylenol for 2 days, and then I was back to normal in terms of pain. Like there was no pain after that. So I said, we're gonna try, but if things shit hits the fan and we need to switch, we're gonna switch. But I'd like to try and do it without it.
so I'm glad that you had a doula. I mean, doula support is amazing for pregnancy, postpartum, all of the above. And I'm glad that your family, even though originally they might have been a little hesitant, they came on board and were supporting you. But you're so right when you were talking about the counselors, like that lived experience, talking with people who really truly get it, not from a clinical standpoint, but from a deep visceral standpoint, can make such a big difference. So, can you talk about how that inspired your current work and your awesome book? That's, if you're
Yeah.
seeing a clip of this, it's right behind you on the shelf. Yeah. So how do you,
There it
can you
is.
talk about how you became that support you wish you had had?
Yeah. So because I'd been doing coaching, I was a certified coach. I thought, I am, at least from a professional space, able to feel comfortable to support individuals in their journey, that I'm not just sort of slapping on the coach title and saying, okay, let's do this. But I felt like, okay, I have gone through, supporting individuals, not in this kind of space, but at least I felt like I had tools one, because I had the certification in terms of training, and then two, because I had the lived experience. And so because I just didn't feel through my journey, there wasn't anyone to talk to or connect with that had that I could find at the time, that I thought, maybe I should open up. I should do something in terms of supporting women and coaching, especially also from a South Asian or Asian background. Like, this isn't something we choose in terms of the path, right? And I also just wanted to be sort of that inspiration for women to know that you can choose this path. It's not, even if you have to go against tradition and it's not culturally accepted, you don't have to give up on your dream of being a mom. And so that's sort of how Choice Mom was born. My daughter was born in January, and I think by June I'd sort of launched Choice Mom coaching. Doing, as she was napping and things, I'd be creating sort of the website and materials and all those kinds of things. And so what I offer is one-to-one coaching with women, more so in the making the decision phase, is where I sort of meet more of the women reaching out to me. They're just not feeling confident, or they're not sure. They're worried about the child not having a father. They're worried about how they'll be able to do it all, and what that looks like. They're not sure what they should be considering, in terms of or preparing for if they're going to choose this path, how to have the conversations with their families and how to deal with that, how to pick a donor. It can be an overwhelming process as well. So I'd say more so the clients that I work with are in that sort of making the decision or preparing to conceive phase. Whereas once you're going through the trying to conceive phase, I feel like there's less support that I can provide because I'm not the medical expert. I can obviously apply support through the emotional side. But I'd say lesser that I'm supporting women on the trying to conceive and solo pregnancy period, but I do that as well. And so that was one of the things. But also when I was going through my process, I journaled through the entire time, and there was about 3 books of journals filled with my entire journey. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to create this book, because there was just no dated resources out there at the time. And I created the book so it would be everything anyone would want to know from starting, in terms of how do you make that decision, all the way to the first few weeks of pregnancy or first few weeks of having the child and things to prepare for. It's my story with coaching, reflection, questions, exercises to help you go through each of the phases of the journey. And so that just came out 2 months ago in April. And so I'm excited that that's finally out there for the world to have as a resource.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
What a huge accomplishment. And inspired by your own journals, like you had all of this documented. That's what an incredible gift to yourself and to so many others.
It's dedicated obviously to my daughter. She will have this to leave behind, but it's also dedicated to any woman that's ever considered this path and unsure, whether they could do it or not. This was the guide that hopefully can help them make that choice. And so, there are like little snippets of my journal entries that are put in there as well, to just get that real feeling of like, how did I feel when I picked that donor and that day that I picked it, and all the emotions? How did I feel when it failed, when I failed a cycle? How did I feel when the embryos didn't pass the pre-genetic testing? There were real sort of pieces in there, again, just so women don't feel as alone, or they kind of resonate with like, yeah, I'm going through these feelings too.
That's so powerful. And again, it comes back to being able to walk with somebody who says, no, I really get it. I've been there.
Right.
But yeah, it's such a beautiful gift to your daughter too. Are you planning on showing her the journals when she gets older, or?
Yeah, I mean, I've kept them, and the book, I've given her the book. She loves pink, and hence why it's pink.
Excellent.
So
Good choice.
Showed it to her. She was like, I like it because it's pink. And I was like, yes. So yes, I hope one day she'll read it.
How are you talking with her about her origin story now? I mean, she's a toddler.
Yeah.
What sort of, conversations are you having? Books are you reading to kind of share her story?
Yeah. So right now, I would say at 3.5, she hasn't necessarily asked the question in terms of who's daddy. She knows that there are mommies and daddies. She does notice like her friends have mommies and daddies. My brother they just had their first baby. And so, she notices all these things. But in her world right now, as a 3.5-year-old, it is not missing anything. Like, she doesn't know that there's anything missing. She obviously will, and I obviously will share it as we go along. But to her, it's more I focus on who she does have, in terms of she has her uncles and she has her grandmas, and so I'm always talking about who she has. And of course, when the question comes up, how I plan to have the conversation or start off the conversation, because it will be an ongoing one, is that mommy really wanted you, and so she went to the doctor, and a kind man gave the doctor his seeds so that I could make you. And you don't have a biological father, but you have grandma, you have grandpa, you have your uncle and auntie, and you have all these people who love you. And so that would sort of be the starter conversation, and we'd sort of build from there as she can understand more and more.
That's a great plan.
I love that.
Yeah, it's rooted in love and wanting to build a family of your own, and you are a family, and it matters just as much as any other.
Yeah. And there will never be a question if she was ever wanted, right? As a single mother by choice,
Yes.
there's no oopsie in that way. And there's
Right.
always that knowing that she was so wanted. And obviously from the book, she'll know how much she was wanted, in terms of the level of struggle that I went through. But that's also something nice that she will always have to lean on.
For sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, we have two questions, Reema, we like to ask all of our guests at the end. So I'll start with the first one. What's one thing that you would say to someone just starting to grow their family?
I'll make this more single mother by choice specific. For single women, we're waiting for the partner, we're waiting for the right time, we're waiting for a lot of things to be in place to start this journey. And a lot of us who choose this journey are in our late 30s, early 40s, where we're like, we're almost out of time here and we need to make the call. And so I always say, just start with the fertility assessment. Just start to see what your options are, right? Because sometimes, as I thought, we're going to be completely fine in terms of getting pregnant. And then we find out it's not as going to be as easy as we thought it would be. And so at least having more information and starting to understand the donor process and what that looks like in terms of how you would select a donor, who the donor would be, just start to build that information and understand that, because that's going to help you really feel like, okay, I really want to do this, or it's not really feeling right to me. Without doing that, you're in this sort of limbo phase of just waiting of the next, when is it going to happen? And getting the information, you can stop at any time when it doesn't feel right to you. But also, it can also be what you need to make that choice faster. And so had I not tried to freeze my eggs and for it to fail, I probably would have waited too long and maybe even missed my chance. So mine is always just start, don't wait for things to be perfect.
Yeah, that's a great point too. Like, I mean, if you hadn't made that decision to do the egg freezing, like who knows what would have been the end of your story. So that's great advice. Keeping the single parent by choice lens, how can somebody show up for a friend or family member who is going through this process?
Yeah. So I thought about this one, and I think about it a lot because I'm a very private person. So a lot, and I also just am a type that kind of works through things, processing it myself or self-coaching myself. So I was thinking about it. And I think the hardest thing when you're going through it as a single mother by choice, not surrounded by people who have actually done this path, is feeling like you don't understand. And people are offering advice because it's based on their lived experience, which is not necessarily the same as the experience you're going through. Like, you get comments like, oh yeah, you can do it. I basically did it myself because my husband was never around to support me. He never changed a diaper. And it's like, no, that's not really the same sort of thing. So I would say it's about, I think the best thing friends and family can do is help you feel seen, in the sense of, I get, I'm not going through what you're going through, but I can understand how much courage or how hard this can be for you. Like, just acknowledging and validating, like, I know I don't understand, but I'm here to support you in any way I can. and just tell me how, because some people want to be alone, some people want space, some people want to have someone with them. And so I think it's just, rather than trying to offer advice, it's just opening that space for them to feel like they can share or not share. And also just recognizing, like, I know I don't know what this is like because I've not been through it, and just acknowledging that, and just saying you're strong for going through it, you're strong for sort of taking the steps that you're taking, and that alone would be helpful.
Yeah, I love that. Is there anything that we haven't asked about that you wanted to share?
I would say actually the only question is around grieving the fairy tale of like doing it with someone. So in terms of making the decision, you grow up watching Disney movies, you are surrounded by people with couples, you assume, one day you will get married and you'll have your partner, and you'll have a child together. So there is a process, or a grieving process, that you will go through throughout the journey. And it's not even at just one point and it's done. I felt like I was grieving it even up until the point that I was pregnant, of feeling like this wasn't the way I thought it would be. And that is a completely normal feeling, to have that, because it's just been so ingrained in us to grow up and find that partner and do it with someone. And so, there is sadness in when you get pregnant because there's no one to share it with. And there's sadness at the ultrasound, even though it's a happy moment. It's like, I don't get to share it with someone like I thought it would. Right. And so there will be those moments, and that is completely normal. So if people are feeling that sadness, it's coming from a place of like, you've grown up with this, and that's completely normal to experience. And sadness will come and go. And even, first weeks of like, there's no one to tap to say, hey, can you grab the baby so I can have a few minutes to just lay down? There are things that you'll have wished you would had. But then I will also say, on the flip side, how do you know it would have been better? How do you know it would have been all great had you had the partner, right? Like, we always assume because we don't have the partner, that we're missing. But also, there are so many couples out there that they have it and they feel completely alone, even with a partner. And so I think sometimes we forget that, as single mothers by choice, that we don't have this. But in reality, it's not just us. There are women who are in relationships that feel that sadness too. And it's a completely normal feeling.
Thank you. That's so important to just normalize and validate that those emotions are part of this journey. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It doesn't mean you're not grateful for what you do have. It's just part of this process. So thank you for really highlighting that.
Yeah, very well said. And it's so important to be able to write your own version of a fairy tale. There's more than one way to build a family, more than one way to have a fairy tale come true.
Yeah.
And
no compromising, no negotiating. It's all your way, is sort of the single mother by choice way, right? Like, you don't have to, you can choose the name, you can choose everything you sort of want in the way you want. And yes, that comes with its own sort of heaviness in terms of making all the decisions, or mental exhaustion. But that is the advantage of getting it the way you want. And I would say my only regret in this entire journey has been not doing it sooner. And so for those who are waiting and still deciding, just start the process.
Well, right. Get the data, get the info you need to help with your decision as soon as possible.
I think that's your next book, though. I think you need to write a fairy tale
about
this family. Like, there are lots of different kinds of fairy tales out there, or there should be.
True.
Show there are lots of different kinds of families. Everybody's happy ending is going to be a little bit different.
It's true.
You can lean into you can give yourself a pink castle. Let your daughter help with the details.
Or we'll go Disney. Well, I'll reach out to Disney and say, we got to create a new kind of fairy tale here, not the Prince Charming one.
100%.
Right.
Well, when that book comes out, let us know.
Yes. Thank you so much, Reema. It's been such a pleasure to hear your story. Thank you for sharing all about your journey and your work.
Yes. Thanks, Reema.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. This was great.
Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week with more family building stories and resources. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so that you never miss an episode. And follow us on social media at allpathsfb, or visit our website, allpathsfb.org, to learn more about our work. And please help spread the word so that anyone who is struggling to grow their family can join the conversation. All Paths Family Building is so grateful to the members of our circle of support. And today we want to recognize and thank Fertility Centers of New England, a first fertility center. Your partnership is vital to our ability to provide emotional support, education, and advocacy that is open to anyone who is struggling to grow their family. And to the entire All Paths community, thank you for being here. It's an honor to walk with you on your journey.